Chios 9 was not a planet meant for human life. Nothing about it felt natural. The frozen world sat near the edge of explored space where the light of distant stars barely reached its surface. Endless fields of black ice stretched across the horizon like a dead ocean, broken only by massive mining towers that drilled deep beneath the planet's crust, searching for rare minerals. But the miners feared something far more than the cold. The storms. Chios storms were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Scientists called them magnetic anomalies, but the workers had another name for them. Soul storms, because during the storms, people disappeared. Machines malfunctioned. Voices echoed through empty radios. Entire patrol teams vanished into the red snow without leaving behind bodies. And tonight, the worst storm in 20 years had arrived. The sky above Chios 9 burned dark crimson as lightning ripped across the clouds in complete silence. Towering communication antennas exploded one after another across the mining colony, sending sparks raining into the snow below. Emergency sirens screamed through the settlement. All personnel returned to shelters immediately. Outside the colony walls, nearly 3 kilometers away, Nathan Hale sat alone inside a tiny emergency cabin built into the side of an ice ridge. The cabin was barely large enough for one person. One narrow bed, one rusted heater, one emergency oxygen filter, and just enough power to survive the night. Nathan stared through the frosted window as violent winds slammed against the metal walls hard enough to shake the entire structure. He hated storms, not because of the danger, because of the silence afterward. Most workers on Chios 9 lived inside the main colony, surrounded by noise and people. Nathan preferred isolation. After serving in the border wars years earlier, he found it easier to live away from everyone else. Less questions, less memories. A loud burst of static suddenly crackled through his radio. All drones lost, repeat, visibility collapsing. Then the signal died completely. Nathan cursed quietly and reached for the heater controls. Nothing. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed. Perfect, he muttered. Outside, the storm grew even louder. The cabin groaned as if something giant was dragging its claws across the roof. Nathan froze. Slowly, he looked toward the door. 3 knocks echoed through the cabin. Thud, thud, thud. Heavy, deliberate, impossible. Nathan's blood turned cold. Nobody could survive outside during a Chios storm. Nobody. For several seconds, he didn't move. The knocking came again, this time softer, weaker. Nathan grabbed the old plasma cutter sitting beside the table and stepped toward the door carefully. His military instincts returned immediately, every nerve in his body screaming that opening the door was a mistake. But if someone really was outside, they would freeze to death within minutes. He unlocked the door. The storm exploded into the cabin instantly, carrying snow and freezing wind across the floor. And standing outside were 2 figures. Women. Tall. Unnaturally tall. Black curved horns rose from their heads, partially covered beneath torn dark cloaks. Their glowing crimson eyes reflected against the storm like burning coals. The Veer. Nathan stumbled backward in shock. Every soldier in the galaxy knew the Veer race. The demons of the border wars. Human propaganda painted them as monsters born from nightmares. Warriors who felt no fear, showed no mercy, and ripped enemy hearts from their bodies during combat rituals. And now 2 of them stood at his door. The older sister supported herself against the frozen wall, clearly injured. Dark blood stained her side beneath cracked armor. Yet despite her condition, her voice remained calm. Controlled. Our shuttle crashed beyond the ridge, she said. We only require shelter until the storm passes. Nathan said nothing. His mind raced. If colony security discovered Veer inside his cabin, he could be executed for treason. But if he closed the door now, they would die. The younger sister stared directly into his eyes. Unlike the older one, she showed no exhaustion, no panique, only curiosity, as if she were studying him. The wind howled violently behind them. Finally, Nathan stepped aside. Get inside, he muttered. For the first time, Surprise crossed the younger sister's face. The two entered quickly while Nathan sealed the door behind them. Silence filled the cabin immediately. The sisters removed their cloaks slowly, revealing dark combat uniforms covered in ice and ash. Up close, they looked even more intimidating. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and strange silver markings ran across their skin like living tattoos. Nathan tried not to stare. The younger sister glanced around the tiny cabin, at the single heater, the single table, the single bed. Then she tilted her head slightly. "There's only one bed?" she asked softly. Nathan nearly choked. The older sister closed her eyes in visible annoyance, while the younger one continued staring at him with unreadable amusement. Outside, thunder shook the cabin again. Nathan forced himself to stay calm, but something felt wrong. The sisters were too calm. People facing death didn't act like this. Then the emergency radio suddenly burst back to life. Static screamed through the speaker before a terrified voice echoed across the cabin. "Emergency alert to all Keogh's personnel. 2 war criminals escaped military transport 3 hours ago. Repeat, do not offer shelter. Armed recovery drones are actively searching the region." Nathan slowly turned toward the sisters. The sisters slowly turned toward him. No one spoke. Then, the lights died. Complete darkness swallowed the cabin. The heater shut off. The oxygen filter stopped humming. And outside, something massive moved through the storm. Not human, not machine. A deep growl vibrated through the metal walls. The younger sister's expression changed instantly for the first time since arriving. Fear, real fear. Then the older sister whispered into the darkness. "They found us." The thing outside the cabin did not sound alive. It moved too evenly, too slowly. Metal walls groaned as heavy footsteps circled the structure through the screaming storm. Every few seconds, long scratching noises dragged across the outer hull like giant claws testing for weakness. Nathan sat near the dying heater with the plasma cutter resting across his knees. Across from him, the 2 sisters remained silent. The emergency lights barely worked now, covering the cabin in a dim red glow that made the sisters' eyes appear even brighter. No one trusted anyone, and everyone knew it. Another scraping sound echoed across the roof. Nathan tightened his grip on the weapon. "What exactly is out there?" he finally asked. The older sister, Seraphine, slowly looked toward the wall. Something that should still be sleeping. That answer only made things worse. The younger sister, Lyra, sat beside the frozen window, watching the storm without blinking. Hours had passed since they entered the cabin, but Nathan had not seen her rest once. Not once. It disturbed him more than the horns, more than the glowing eyes. Humans blinka. Humans schichta nervosely. Humans showed exhaustion. Lyra simply watched, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment. Nathan tried focusing on practical things instead. The oxygen filter was failing. The heater barely produced warmth anymore. Ice slowly crept across the cabin floor despite the insulation. At this rate, all 3 of them would freeze before morning. Seraphine suddenly winced in pain. Nathan noticed faint red light glowing beneath the cracks in her armor. At first he thought it was blood. Then he realized the light was moving beneath her skin. Strange glowing patterns spread across her arms like burning veins. He immediately stepped back. "What the hell is that?" Seraphine quickly pulled her sleeve down. "Nothing dangerous," she answered. "That's usually what dangerous people say." To Nathan's surprise, Lyra laughed quietly. The sound felt wrong inside the tiny cabin. Too soft, too normal. "You fear us constantly," she said. "Yet you still allowed us inside." Nathan stared at her carefully. "I've fought soldiers before," he replied coldly. "I know what your people are capable of." For the first time, the smile disappeared from Lyra's face. Outside, the scratching stopped. Complete silence replaced it. Somehow, that felt even worse. Nathan moved closer to the window, trying to see through the snowstorm outside. Nothing but darkness. Then suddenly, bang! Something slammed into the cabin hard enough to shake the walls. Nathan nearly... "It was never a transmission," she whispered. "It was a prison lock." The cabin suddenly felt much colder. Nathan laughed nervously. You expect me to believe something ancient is buried under this planet? Seraphine looked directly into his eyes. We tried warning both governments to stop digging. Instead, they silenced everyone involved. Nathan's heartbeat slowed. That's why they're hunting you. Yes. Another loud sound interrupted them. But this time, the scratching outside had stopped completely. No wind, no movement, nothing. The silence became unbearable. Then something huge landed on the roof. Crack! The entire cabin shook violently. Nathan looked up just as the metal ceiling bent inward. Another impact. Another crack. And then, the roof exploded open. Snow and freezing air rushed inside as a pale creature crawled through the darkness above them. Its body looked stretched and unnatural, with long skeletal limbs pressing against the walls. Dozens of glowing white eyes opened across its skin, searching, twitching, hungry. Nathan raised the plasma cutter with trembling hands. But the creature ignored the sisters completely. Every single glowing eye turned toward him, and then it screamed. The creature's scream did not sound organic. It sounded mechanical, like metal tearing apart underwater. Nathan's ears rang as the pale monster dropped from the ruined ceiling into the cabin. Its long skeletal limbs smashed through the floor panels, while dozens of glowing white eyes twitched across its body independently. Every eye stared at Nathan, hungry. The creature moved instantly. Nathan barely rolled aside before razor-like claws sliced through the bed behind him, shredding the mattress into sparks and fabric. The only bed in the cabin was gone in seconds. "Nathan, move!" Seraphine shouted. Lyra lunged forward with unnatural speed, driving a combat blade into the creature's neck. The blade snapped instantly. The monster turned toward her slowly, almost curiously, before releasing another horrifying metallic shriek. Then it attacked. The cabin exploded into chaos. The creature smashed through walls like paper while Nathan grabbed the damaged plasma cutter and fired wildly. Bright blue plasma rounds burned holes through the monster's pale skin. But underneath the flesh, glowing machinery pulsed beneath its body. Nathan froze. It wasn't fully alive, and it wasn't fully machine. "What is this thing?" he shouted. Seraphine slammed a metal pipe through one of the creature's glowing eyes. "Run first," she yelled. Questions later. The floor suddenly collapsed beneath them. All three crashed into the frozen maintenance tunnels buried under the cabin, just as the creature tore through the structure above them. The cabin disappeared into the storm behind them. Now they were trapped underground. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the tunnel walls, revealing rusted pipes covered in ice. Somewhere deep below, massive mining drills still echoed through the darkness. But something else echoed too. Screams. Human screams. Nathan's blood turned cold. The colony. The creatures had reached the colony. A broken emergency broadcast crackled through nearby speakers. "Sector 4 has fallen. They're inside the walls. Don't let them." Static swallowed the rest. Nathan immediately started moving. "We have to help them." Lyra grabbed his arm sharply. "You will die." "Maybe," Nathan snapped. "But they'll definitely die if nobody goes." The sisters exchanged a silent glance. Neither understood him. Every logical decision said to escape. Survival came first. That was how most species thought. But humans were different. Humans kept moving even when terrified. And Nathan was terrified. His hands shook constantly now. His breathing was uneven. Every distant sound made his pulse spike. But he kept going anyway. That confused the sisters more than anything. The deeper they moved through the tunnels, the worse things became. Entire maintenance sectors had gone silent. Frozen blood covered the walls. Doors looked bent outward from the inside. Some bodies showed claw wounds. Others looked almost drained, their skin pale and hollow, as if something had consumed energy directly from their nervous systems. Nathan forced himself not to look too long. Then they found survivors. A small group of miners barricaded inside an equipment station. The moment the miners saw the Vare sisters, panic exploded. "Aliens!" One miner raised a weapon immediately. Nathan stepped in front of the sisters before anyone could fire. "Stop," he shouted. "They're helping us." Nobody lowered their guns. The tension almost broke into violence, until distant screeches echoed through the tunnels again. The creatures were coming. Fast. Nathan immediately began reinforcing the barricade using loose pipes, broken welding panels, and damaged mining carts. Seraphine watched silently. "You build defenses while afraid," she said quietly. Nathan laughed bitterly while working. "That's basically humanity's specialty." The creatures attacked minutes later. Pale biomechanical horrors flooded the tunnels from every direction, moving across walls and ceilings with horrifying speed. Nathan's makeshift traps exploded one after another, collapsing parts of the corridor and slowing the swarm. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. "You improvised all this in seconds." Nathan reloaded the plasma cutter. "Welcome to being human." The battle was brutal. The miners fought desperately beside the same Vare warriors they once feared. Seraphine protected wounded civilians repeatedly, throwing herself into danger without hesitation. And every time Nathan thought someone was doomed, Lyra saved them. Again and again. Slowly, the fear between them began changing. Not disappearing, but changing. During a brief moment of silence after the attack, the group rested inside an abandoned tram station. Nathan sat beside Lyra while checking his damaged weapon. "You could have left earlier," he said quietly. "Why stay and fight for strangers?" Lyra remained silent for several seconds. "In Vare culture," she finally said, "attachment is dangerous. Warriors who care too deeply become weak." Nathan looked at her carefully. "And you believe that?" Her glowing eyes shifted toward him. "I did before tonight." For the first time since meeting her, Nathan saw uncertainty in her expression. Not coldness, not superiority. Fear. Not fear of dying. Fear of caring. Suddenly, Seraphine activated an old colony terminal nearby. Static filled the screen before fragmented files appeared. Mining reports. Corporate communications. Encrypted transmissions. Nathan stepped closer. Then his face darkened. This can't be real. The ancient signal beneath Kios 9 had never been accidental. A human corporation called Helix Dominion discovered the buried alien structure months ago, and instead of shutting it down, they activated it intentionally. The magnetic storms, the awakenings, the creatures, all of it had been engineered. Why? Because humanity needed another enemy. Another war. Fear created profit. If the creatures spread beyond Kios 9, entire systems would demand military expansion. Weapons contracts, colonial control, emergency powers, billions of credits. They sacrificed this planet, Nathan whispered. Seraphine nodded slowly and blamed the Vare for everything. Before anyone could respond, the terminal suddenly beeped. An incoming transmission. Nathan activated it immediately. Colony command appeared briefly through heavy static. His relief lasted less than 2 seconds, because behind the commander, massive warships filled the sky above Kios 9. Black armored cruisers, human cruisers, dozens of them. The commander's face looked grim. "To all remaining survivors," he announced, "planetary sterilization begins in 2 hours." The room went silent. Nathan stared at the screen in disbelief. "They're not sending rescue ships," he whispered. Seraphine's expression hardened. "No," she said quietly. The warships arrived silently. That was the worst part. No speeches, no rescue broadcasts, no promises. They simply appeared above Kios 9 like dark shadows descending through the crimson storm clouds, their enormous hulls blocking out the red lightning flashing across the sky. From the broken tram station windows, Nathan watched them move into formation over the colony. Human ships, human weapons, human commanders preparing to destroy their own people. Around him, terrified miners stared upward in disbelief. One woman dropped to her knees. "They're here to save us, right?" Nobody answered, because deep down, everyone already knew the truth. Nathan felt something inside him crack. Not fear, not anger, something worse. Disappointment. All his life, humanity had called the Vare monsters. Humanity claimed aliens were ruthless, emotionless creatures willing to sacrifice anyone for victory. But now, the real monsters were sitting safely aboard warships hundreds of kilometers above the surface, preparing to erase thousands of innocent lives just to bury a corporate secret. The creatures beneath the ice were terrifying, but fear had created something even worse: humanity's willingness to sacrifice others to protect power. Seraphine stepped beside him quietly. "The fleet is preparing orbital fire," she said. "Once they begin, this colony will cease to exist." Nathan looked around the ruined station. Injured workers huddled together near dying heaters. Children cried softly beside exhausted parents. People who had spent their entire lives mining a frozen planet for corporations that now considered them disposable. And suddenly Nathan understood something terrifying. The creatures were never the true enemy. Fear was. Fear of losing control. Fear of the truth. Fear of admitting mistakes. That fear had already doomed an entire world. Behind him, Lyra activated a hidden holographic device. A faint blue image of a small Vare shuttle appeared above her hand. "There is still one escape route," she said quietly. "Our shuttle remains hidden beneath Sector 12. Nathan turned toward her. "It can bypass the blockade?" "Yes." Hope flickered through the station immediately. Then Lyra continued speaking. "But it only has enough power for 3 passengers." Silence crushed the room. Nathan stared at her. 3 passengers. Him, Seraphine, Lyra, nobody else. Some of the miners lowered their eyes immediately, already understanding what would happen next. Others looked at Nathan desperately, silently begging him not to leave them behind. Seraphine stepped forward carefully. "You are not responsible for these people," she said. "Your species abandoned this colony already. You owe them nothing." Nathan looked at the frightened survivors surrounding him. Then he remembered something from the war years earlier. Burning ships, evacuation alarms, soldiers abandoning civilians because command considered them acceptable losses. He remembered the guilt, the shame, and he remembered promising himself he would never become that kind of person again. Nathan shook his head slowly. "No." Lyra frowned slightly. "You choose death." "No, not tan replay. I choose to fight." The sisters exchanged confused looks. Nathan pointed toward the ceiling where distant explosions echoed across the colony. "If those warships fire while these creatures are still spreading underground, the entire planet could rupture. Maybe worse." Seraphine's expression changed. "You believe the alien structures beneath the ice are unstable." "I know mining reactors," Nathan answered. "And I know corporations cut corners. If we overload the reactor grid manually, we can collapse the lower tunnels." Lyra immediately understood. "You want to bury the creatures underground and create enough thermal interference to stop orbital targeting systems," Nathan added. The station fell silent again. It was a suicidal plan. Nathan knew it. Everyone knew it. But it was still a plan. Finally, Lyra asked the question quietly. "Why?" Nathan looked directly at her. "Because that's what humans are supposed to do." The words hit harder than any speech. Even Seraphine looked shaken by the answer. The Vare believed emotional attachment weakened warriors. Humans were the opposite. The more humans cared, the more dangerous they became. And for the first time, the sisters truly understood humanity. Not humanity the Empire described. Not humanity from propaganda broadcasts. Real humanity. Flawed, afraid, but still willing to stand back up. The colony transformed within minutes. Miners armed themselves with industrial cutters and welding torches. Their combat tactics mixed with human engineering improvisation. Barricades rose across reactor corridors while survivors evacuated deeper into shielded sectors. Humans and Vare fought side by side openly for the first time in history. And Nathan stood at the center of it all, not as a soldier, not as a hero, just a mechanic refusing to give up. The final battle began near the reactor core. The creatures poured through the tunnels endlessly, their glowing white eyes filling entire corridors like moving stars in the darkness. Nathan sprinted across collapsing catwalks while manually activating overload systems one by one. Behind him, Seraphine fought like a storm itself, her glowing arm markings blazing bright red as she cut through creatures with terrifying precision. But Lyra stayed near Nathan constantly, protecting him, trusting him. At one point, a collapsing support beam nearly crushed Nathan before Lyra shoved him aside at the last second. "You continue risking yourself for everyone," she shouted over the alarms. Even now, Nathan forced a tired grin while reconnecting reactor cables. Bad habit. The final overload sequence activated. Warning sirens screamed instantly. Reactor cascade initiated. Countdown, 10 minutes. The underground tunnels began shaking violently. "It's working," Nathan shouted. Then a gunshot echoed through the chamber. Nathan froze. Pain exploded through his chest. He slowly looked downward. Blood spread across his jacket. Standing behind him was a human corporate officer wearing damaged security armor. Director Valle, one of the executives responsible for awakening the signal. "You idiot," Vale hissed. "Do you realize how valuable this discovery was?" Nathan collapsed against the console. Around them, the reactor chamber began tearing apart. Seraphine roared in fury and charged forward, but the floor suddenly split open beneath everyone. Massive cracks raced through the chamber as ancient ice collapsed into darkness below. Nathan lost his footing. Lyra lunged toward him desperately. Their hands almost touched. Almost. Then the ground disappeared beneath him entirely. Nathan fell into the abyss below the colony, while reactor fire erupted above him. Down, down, deep beneath the ice, until finally he crashed on a cold metal. Nathan groaned painfully and forced himself upright. Then he looked around and forgot how to breathe. An enormous city stretched beneath the planet. Ancient towers glowed beneath layers of transparent ice. Massive alien structures pulsed with blue light in the darkness. Machines still moved silently through empty streets. After thousands of years, the city was still alive. They're sending executioners. Nathan stood alone beneath an entire world. Above him, Keo's 9 was dying. The colony reactors were collapsing. The warships prepared orbital fire. Millions of tons of ice cracked apart across the planet's surface, while ancient predators swarmed through the tunnels above. But down here, everything was silent. The hidden city stretched endlessly beneath the frozen crust like the ruins of a forgotten god. Massive black towers pulsed with streams of blue energy that still flowed after thousands of years. Strange symbols moved across transparent walls like living code. And at the center of the city, a single tower remained active. Nathan stepped forward carefully. The floor beneath him lit up instantly. Ancient machines awakened all around him with deep metallic sounds that echoed through the empty streets. Then a voice filled the darkness. Not human, not Vare, ancient. Defense network online. Nathan froze. Suddenly holographic images appeared around him. He saw impossible scenes from long ago. An advanced civilization spreading across stars. Massive wars consuming planets. Entire fleets destroyed by pale, biomechanical creatures. The predators. They were never animals. They were weapons, created thousands of years earlier by this ancient civilization as living defense machines capable of adapting to any enemy. But eventually the creators lost control. To stop extinction, they buried the entire system beneath Keo's 9 and sealed it forever. Until humans began mining. Until corporations activated the signal again. Nathan stared upward in horror. The storms, the creatures, the destruction, all of it was an automatic defense response. Then another message appeared before him. Primary control, core damaged. A glowing chamber slowly rose from beneath the floor. Inside floated a sphere of shifting blue light connected to thousands of black cables. The core. Nathan stepped closer. Immediately, information flooded his mind. The core could still shut down the predators. It could disable every awakened defense system across the planet. It could even stop the warships above. But there was one problem. The system no longer had an operating intelligence. It needed a living mind to merge with it permanently. Nathan understood instantly what that meant. No return. No survival. The moment the merge completed, his consciousness would become part of the alien network forever. Footsteps suddenly echoed behind him. Nathan turned sharply as Lyra and Seraphine emerged from the darkness, injured and exhausted. Lyra ran toward him immediately. "You're alive." For the first time, her voice sounded emotional. Not controlled, not distant. Human. Nathan gave a weak smile. Barely. Seraphine's eyes locked onto the glowing core instantly. Then her expression darkened. "No," she whispered. "Absolutely not." Nathan already knew she understood. Above them, the city trembled violently. The reactor countdown was reaching critical levels. Time was gone. "The core can stop everything," Nathan said quietly. "The creatures, the fleet, all of it. And kill you," Lyra snapped. Nathan stayed silent. That silence answered everything. Lyra stepped closer, anger and fear fighting across her face. "You humans are insane," she whispered. "You throw yourselves into death for people who barely know your names." Nathan looked at her carefully. "Maybe." "No," she said, her glowing eyes trembling slightly. "Not maybe." For several seconds, she struggled to speak. Then finally, the truth came out. "When I first saw humans during the war, I thought your species was weak, emotional, chaotic." She swallowed hard. "But now I understand why the galaxy fears your kind." Nathan frowned slightly. Lyra looked directly into his eyes. "Humans are dangerous because you care too much." The words hit harder than any confession. Even Seraphine lowered her head silently. Nathan looked back toward the glowing core. "If nobody stops this," he said softly, "millions die. Humans. There. Everyone." The city shook again. Far above them, distant explosions echoed through the ice. The warships had started firing. Nathan took a slow breath. Then he stepped into the chamber. Lyra grabbed his arm desperately. "Please," she whispered. That single word nearly broke him. But Nathan only smiled sadly. "For one night," he said quietly, "you trusted a human." Then the merge began. Black cables wrapped around Nathan's body instantly as blue light flooded the chamber. Pain exploded through his nervous system while billions of alien signals rushed into his mind all at once. The city awakened. Across Kios 9, every ancient structure suddenly activated. The predators froze mid-attack. Then, one by one, they collapsed. Entire swarms shut down instantly across the colony tunnels. Above the planet, the human warships suddenly lost power as invisible energy waves surged through orbit. Weapon systems failed. Engines died. Navigation collapsed. Panic spread across the fleet. And then Nathan did one final thing. He broadcast everything. Every corporate transmission. Every hidden order. Every proof of the conspiracy. Across human space, billions watched the truth emerge live. The corporations awakening the signal. The planned genocide. The attempted cover-up. The lie collapsed in minutes. Human protests erupted across entire systems. Military commanders refused further orders. And for the first time in decades, humans and Ver stopped preparing for war. Weeks later, the storms finally ended. For the first time in years, sunlight touched the frozen surface of Kios 9. Survivors rebuilt the colony slowly alongside Ver engineers who chose to remain and help. The hatred between species had not disappeared completely, but something had changed. Hope existed now. Near the edge of the colony, Nathan's old cabin still stood partially buried in snow. One evening before departing, Lyra entered the cabin alone. The room was exactly as he left it. The broken heater, the rusted table, and the single narrow bed. Untouched, she stared at it quietly for a long time. Then she sat down slowly and allowed herself one small smile. "For one night," she whispered into the silence, "a human changed the galaxy." Far beneath the frozen planet, deep below the ancient city, one hidden signal still pulsed quietly in the darkness. Not a warning, not a defense system, a message, sending itself endlessly into deep space. And somewhere far beyond known stars, Something heard it. Something ancient began to wake, and it was coming toward Earth.